So we're starting on percentages today, we're moving on from fractions. There are some links between them, and you will see them as we're going along, but yeah, this is the start of a new topic. So, firstly, what is a percentage? I'm sure lots of you will have heard of percentages, maybe if you've watched the news or in tests or homework scores when you get them back. You may have heard of them, you've probably done some work with them at primary school as well. And we'll start off with some non-calculator ones. So all the ones we do today you should be working out without a calculator. So basically a percentage is a way of showing an amount compared to another amount. So we'll see this as an example later on in the lesson. So you can think of percent as just meaning out of 100. So 50% is 50 out of 100. 100% is 100 out of 100. So 100% is the full amount. If you have 100 out of 100 of something, you've got the full amount. So it's basically just a representation. If you had 100, the percentage tells you how many you would have. Okay, so we've already covered this. The original amount's 100%, so it's 100 out of 100. Okay, so what we're going to look at now is how we find certain percentages. And all, as I said, all the ones we do today are ones that you can do without a calculator. So if we've got here, so this bar, that represents 100%. And we want to find 50%. So basically, how many 50% go into 100? So let's draw another bar with 50% on them. So we can split 100 into two lots of 50s. So we can draw a bar underneath it, so 50 here and a 50 here. And the way we've done that is we've done 100 divided by 2 to get 50%. So to find 50% of a number, we divide it by 2. So for example, if the question was find 50% of 30, all we would do is divide it by 2. So it's really not that difficult to find 50% of a number, you just halve it. And that is because half of 100 is 50. So to find 50%, we just halve it. So let's do an example where we find 50% of a number. So we're going to try and find 50% of 40. So again, we're starting off with our 100% bar. This represents the full amount. So in this case, that represents 40, because our full amount is 40. So to find 50%, we need to split 100 into two lots of 50, so we're going to halve it. So again, we're going to draw our bar with the two 50%. So we can see that there's two of them, and so that means we're going to divide 100 into two parts. And so the 100% is equivalent to 40. So that means we're dividing this by 2. How many is going to go for each one? So if we divide 40 into two parts, we're going to get 20 for each part. So to work out 50% of an amount, we divide by 2. So we've done that, and we've got that 50% is equivalent to 20. So we're done. We've worked it out. We've worked out 50% of 40. That equals 20. So all we have to do to find 50% of an amount is we just halve it. So if you want to make a note of that, it's a really good way of working out 50%. Okay, so we're also going to have a look at finding 10%. Oh, if you haven't already, so we've just done 50%. You can pause the video now. You'll be able to do the first chunk on the Dr. Frost test. I think it's questions 1 to 5. They're all finding 50%. So if you want to pause the video and go have a go at them, you can do. If you'd rather watch the full video than have a go at all at once, you can do that as well. Okay, so finding 10%, again we're going to start off, we've got our bar that represents the full 100%. And if we're to split it into 10%, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 parts. And that is because 100 divided by 10 is 10. So we're splitting it into 10 parts. So to find 10% of something, all we do is we divide it by 10, because each of the tenths is going to be a 10%. So that's our rule to remember for this. So to find 10% of an amount, all we do is divide it by 10. So this is a really common mistake. A lot of people think that because we're finding 10% we divide by 10, some people would think, okay, so to find 20% we divide by 20. That doesn't work. It only works for 10, this rule. But to find 10% of an amount, we divide it by 10. So we'll do an example with a number now as well. Okay, so let's find 10% of 80. So we're starting off with 100%, and we're told that the original amount is 80. So we know that our 100% is equal to 80. So these are the same. So 100% is 80. And what we're going to work out now is what 10% equals. So from before, we saw that we need to split it into how many parts? It was 10 parts. So we need to divide this by 10. So 100% divided by 10 gives 10%. So we need to do 80 divided by 10 to work out how big each of these is. So we do 80 divided by 10. So to work out 10% of a number, as we divide it by 10, so we've done 80 divided by 10, that gives us 8. So each of these 10% is worth 8. So that tells us we're just looking for 10%, so we already know it. We've got that 10% equals 8. So we've got our answer. So to work out 10% of an amount, all you do is divide by 10. Really straightforward. So if you want to pause the video now, this makes up the next set of questions on Dr. Frost. I think that's question 6 to question 10 or 11. And they're all finding 10%. And then when you've done that, come back to the video, watch the last section. Okay, so the last section is how we find multiples of 10%. So what I mean by that is finding 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%. So anything that's a multiple of 10 is a really good way of working this out. So we know already from the first bit how we find 10%. So we know that to find 10% of a number, we just divide it by 10. So let's say we're trying to find 20% of a number. So we know how to find 10%. To find 20%, all we do is we've got 2 of them. So we work out 10% and then we times it by 2 to get 20%. So have a think, how would we find, let's say, 30% of a number then? So if you want to pause and have a think about it, you can do. So to find 30% of a number, if we know 10%, to find 30%, that's just 3 lots of it. Because that's 10 plus 10 plus 10, which is 30. So to find 30% of a number, we find 10%. So 30% equals 3 lots of 10%. So we work out 10% and then just times it by 3. So how would we find 80%? Well, that is just 8 lots of 10%. So you work out 10% by dividing by 10 and then you just times it by 8. So the first step, find 10%. So whenever you're doing a multiple of 10, you always find 10% first. And then you just multiply by whatever you need to get the percentage. So if you're trying to find 90%, you find 10%, you times it by 9. If you're trying to find 40%, find 10%, times it by 4. So you just times by whatever you need to get the percentage you're looking for. Okay, so let's go through an example. And so we are finding 40% of 60. So first thing to note is the original amount. So the original amount is 60, so that means 100%, which is the original amount, is 60. So we can put that in now. So we know that this top bar here, the 100% bar, that is 60. So to work out 10%, which is our first step, we split this 100% into 10 parts. We divide it by 10. So that will tell us what 10% is. So we work out the 10%, so divide 60 by 10, and we work out that each of these 10% is 6. So we know 10% equals 6, and we've done that because we've done 60 divided by 10 equals 6. So that is step 1. So now we know that 10% equals 6. How would we work out 40%? So if 10% is 6, 40%, that is 4 of these sections. So that is 1 lot of 6. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4 lots of 6s. So if we've got 4 lots of 6s, what will that be? So we can times it together. So we do 6 times 4, because we've got 4 lots of 6s. That gives us 24. So when you know 10%, it's really easy to get to any multiple of 10. You just times it by whatever you need. So for that one, 40% of 60 is 24. Okay, so let's do 60% of 200. So again, we're starting with an original amount, so that'll represent 100%. So our original amount is 200. So the first step was to find 10%. So to find 10% of a number, all we do is to divide it by 10. So if we start with 100%, we divide it by 10 to get 10%. So if we start at 200, we do 200 divided by 10, and that gives me 20. So that tells me each of these 10% is equal to 20. Now we know what 10% is now, we know that 10% is 20, but we're looking for 60%. So what do I have to do to get to 60%? Well, that would be 6 lots of 10%. So we're going to multiply. So if we know that 10% equals 60, 60% must be 6 lots of that. So we need to do 6 times 20, which is 120. So 60% of 200 is 120. Okay, so one last example. If you're already reaching near the 50-minute time limit for the lesson, don't watch this example, go and finish the Dr. Frost. If you've still got some time, if you've got through the early ones already, stick around for this one because it's a little bit harder and it's worth seeing. So this time we're looking for 30% of 25. So that tells us our original amount is 25. So 100% is 25. So because we're looking for a multiple of 10%, a good place to start is finding 10%. So to find 10% of a number, we have to divide by 10. So to work out 10% of 25, we have to do 25 divided by 10. And that gives us 2.5. So we have a decimal answer here, but that's completely fine. We can get decimal answers with these. We haven't done so far, but you can do. So if you get a decimal, you haven't necessarily made a mistake. So we're looking, so we can put in what we've done so far. So we've worked out 10% is 2.5. But from the question, we're looking for 30%. So how would we work out 30% if we know 10%? Well, it's 3 lots of 10%. So 30% equals 3 lots of 10%. So when we know 10%, we times it by 3. So 30% is 3 lots of 2.5. 3 lots of 2.5 is 7.5. So we've got our final answer now. We've got 30% of 25 is 7.5. And you can see we've got a decimal answer, but that is fine. You can end up with that. So we've finished with this question now. It's a bit harder than the ones we're doing today, but if you have watched this one, you should be feeling a little bit more confident with these because this is a bit beyond where we need to go. So just a quick summary of some methods of how we do it. So up here we've got how we find 50%. So if you want to pause and leave this as the slide you leave on while you go do the questions, that's great. So to find 50% of a number, we just halve it. Or you could do dividing by 2, it's the same as halving. So dividing by 2. To find 10%, quite easy to remember, you just divide by 10. And this last one, to find multiples of 10, this is the hardest one we've done today. First we divide by 10 to find 10%, and then we multiply to get whatever we need. So if we needed 40%, you'd multiply by 4. If you needed 60%, you'd times by 6. So you work out 10% first, and then multiply after to work out multiples of 10%. Great, so if you haven't already, go and finish the Dr. Frost, make sure you press submit, and email me if you have any questions about the Dr. Frost or about the work.